Welcome back to Power and Politics. The Liberal government spent this week grappling with two distinct political issues, each of which exposed some fault lines inside their caucus. The disagreements over Canada's approach to the Israel-Hamas war led to some tense moments at this week's caucus meeting after 24 Liberal MPs released a letter calling for a ceasefire, a move that blindsided some of their colleagues. And just yesterday, the Prime Minister announced a change in his carbon tax plan to calm the frustration of Atlantic MPs facing voters angry about the high cost of home heating oil. We're going to check the pulse of federal politics this week. I'm joined by Susan Delacourt, national columnist of the Toronto Star, who's filling in for Melanie Richer tonight. Greg MacEachern is a former Liberal ministerial staffer and now with CAN Strategies. Fred DeLorey, former Conservative campaign manager and partner at North Star Public Affairs. Hello, gang. With Melanie away on vacation, I didn't want another political staffer. I wanted reinforcements from the journalistic world to handle you two.
2 on 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I needed, it's been a busy week.
Why am I scared?
I want to start. I want to start with the issue on what happened yesterday at 4 o'clock Ottawa time, the walking back of the tax on home heating oil. And I want to show you some tape from two Liberal MPs with two very different opinions. And just take a listen to this.
Is this a political decision, what you made yesterday?
No, I would say it's a pragmatic decision. To adjust one element of the carbon pricing system for those people where alternatives are difficult to implement.
People are skeptical. Is that because they think this is a political decision because of the political circumstances? I mean, certainly politics does play a role in this, right, Mr. McDonald?
Oh, everything we do, politics plays a role in it as a politician. You know that.
So Greg, I spent last night getting yelled at by Liberals on Twitter that this had nothing to do with politics. A Liberal tells me it has a lot to do with politics. What's going on here?
I think of that phrase from Casablanca, like, I can't believe there's gambling in this casino. I can't believe there's politics in this politics. It's absolutely political. I'm a bit relieved. I'm also, as an Atlantic Canadian, I'm a bit annoyed. The last time, it's been a couple of weeks since we've talked. The last time we talked about these exact topics. You mentioned earlier the lack of senior advice in the PMO from Atlantic Canada and how they've been slow to respond to things. The other thing I remember talking to you about is the fact that people don't seem to understand, and there's been a lot of smart people, some of them that are sometimes even on this show, that realize that people still burn oil in Nova Scotia. I remember, after leaving university, living paycheck to paycheck, going through a really cold winter where oil prices were really high and trying to figure out, you're perhaps even buying $100 of oil at a time. So I get this. I get this pain. It pains me how long it took to kind of absorb this information. The other thing that I'd say on the communication side is you need good policy that's easily communicated. But there are other programs that are in existence right now. Greener Homes is one. The oil to heat pumps has been around since November of 22. Why do people not know about that? People are saying, well, what about, if I heat through propane? Well, there are programs for that, but no one seems to know. So I hope there's a bit of a learning here about the bigger, this could have been headed off a lot sooner.
Fred, if people can't see it at home, Greg and Fred have their X rings on, so they're both proud Atlantic Canadians and Nova Scotians. Obviously, this was an issue for the Liberals in Atlantic Canada. I don't know if this is enough or soon enough to put a floor under them in the region, but how do you think this plays politically out there and why they had to do it?
Yeah, well, as Greg mentioned, using oil is a major way that people heat their homes. So the carbon tax has negatively impacted Atlantic Canadians more so than other Canadians. At the end of the day, we're seeing the polling numbers, and this is a Liberal fortress. In 2015, they won every single seat in Atlantic Canada, all 32, and they're all at risk now, or the vast majority of them are. If those seats are enough to shift who's in government. So the Liberals are bleeding there big time, and a big part of this is obviously carbon tax is one of those issues where when the environment is a top issue, it's a winning issue for the Liberals. When inflation and out of control prices are the top issue of the day, it's a winning issue for the Conservatives.
Right.
And that's where we are right now, and that's why the Conservatives are really benefiting from this. They have the axe the tax tour. that Poilievre has been doing. He's now, you said they did this announcement at 4 o'clock yesterday, an hour before he was doing his first big event in Atlantic Canada.
In Windsor, Nova Scotia.
In Windsor, yeah. So yeah, look, this is this enough to stop the bleeding for the Liberals? We'll have to see, and how they communicate this as well. Just doing one announcement and announcing it that way. They have to be pushing this message out, and I don't know if we're going to be seeing those checks in the mail like we used to see back in the day, or how that's going to work.
Those big giant ones?
Or the heat pumps on the houses. But, you know, and Susan, this is happening as Pierre Poilievre is in St. John's right now at the Delta Hotel, having a rally there. But it was interesting in the conversations with Ken MacDonald earlier. I said, how do you think this got done? He goes, it was the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. I said, do you think it was the Environment Minister? He's like, nope. He was critical of Stephen Guilbeault. He's not giving him a lot of credit here right now.
You know, and we picked that up from Premier Fury as well, too, who said as well, was it today? All blurred. Oh, yeah,
He's criticized Guilbeault a lot, so today he definitely said
he said the same thing. Yeah. So it strikes me that this government, for first 2 terms, it was mostly reacting to external events.
Right.
You know, whether it was Trump or Ford or pandemic. But the last year, it's been reacting to internal trouble. And this is a really interesting development that we saw it in London at the caucus there, this stress on affordability. The calls are coming from inside the House, in other words. So, and it's not a good look for them. It's not a good look.
Well, you know, Greg, it was, I don't know, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, Ken MacDonald sat right there and did the interview that Pierre Poilievre clipped and put on his Twitter feed, you know, where he said people
Thank
are
you,
losing
CBC.
faith. Yeah, you're welcome. People are losing faith in the Liberal government, you know, across Newfoundland and Labrador. He doesn't know what he's going to do in his political future. I thought for the life of me he was going to get kicked out of caucus. He was going to be punished in some way. Not only did none of that happen, he got what he wanted.
Well, and I said he would not get punished because, first of all, it's minority government. Let's just do the math.
Yeah.
And they don't want to make a hero out of him. There probably will be some repercussions, but I'm glad you asked him about running provincially, because as soon as we left the set last week, I got a text from a faithful viewer who said, I think he's running provincially. And tonight you asked him, and I noticed he didn't say no.
No, he said it's on the table. He also said he was asked Fred by Cliff Small, who's the Conservative MP for Newfoundland. A guy beat Scott Sims last time to cross the floor, and he said no. And so it just shows you for how volatile the Atlantic situation is, and the potential for an even bigger caucus management challenge for the Liberals out of this.
Yeah, well, at the same time, I like him as a Liberal MP. He's been very helpful to the Conservative cause, so I don't know why we're trying to poach him. But, yeah, no, this is, we have MPs like that speaking out like this, and we have 2 MPs, one a cabinet minister, saying very different messages. You have a huge communications problem. And this is a government that's getting long in the tooth. They've been around a long time, and this feels like end of days for a political government.
So, Susan, you know, they now have a national climate policy, a carbon price that is being applied asymmetrically, and you can make good arguments because of the unique circumstances of Atlantic Canada. But now you see people making those arguments. The North is affected by this as well. I should acknowledge that. I just got an email from a viewer saying we didn't mention the North, and I know people burn oil, but Western Canada, Central Canada, Doug Ford. I mean, this could have consequences.
We may be in for a time of boutique carbon taxes, where all of a sudden it's not going to be as universal. We haven't even talked, though, about, and maybe I should because Melanie's not here, about what this does on the left. You know, the Liberals have a progressive left to hold up in the next election campaign. That's how they're planning. It's not a secret. They were planning to conduct the next election campaign as a stark choice between a progressive left and a conservative, ultra-conservative right. And what's the NDP going to say about this? You know, we saw Catherine McKenna, the former environment minister, on Twitter saying her heart was broken. This was a signature achievement for this government as well. So I think, you know, that right now they're watching that flank, but there's the bigger picture to talk about too.
Should Catherine McKenna's heart be broken when we're talking about 3% of Canadian homes, mostly people who are older with lower valued properties and lower incomes? Is that really a heartbreaking situation?
I think she's talking about the fact that, and she injected a lot of it in there, the symbolism of it. You know, that's, you know, this was a symbolic thing for this government, and it definitely feels like a retreat.
Yeah.
It also, though, like, let's be realistic about the events that have changed. We've had a pandemic. We've had, I heard Ken McDonald say he was concerned about whether or not heat pumps would even be available because
it's a huge problem.
We still have supply chain issues. But if the goal is to move people off oil, a heat pump program does do that. And I will tell you, I personally have one. I replaced an ancient air conditioning that was noisy and inefficient. I can see the change in my hydro bill, but I also know when I moved here from Halifax to Ottawa, in terms of natural gas, heat was included in most of the rentals. You will not find that in Nova Scotia because it's often oil or electricity.
Yeah, I had a February oil bill on a 3-bedroom, 2,000 square foot house in St. John's. That was $800 1 year. And that was like 15 years ago. So that just gives you an idea of how bad it can be, right? So anyway, the other caucus management issue this week, Fred, it played out more in the Liberals. The Conservatives are completely on side with Israel, right? You saw them support humanitarian pauses after, only after hostages were released and foreign nationals, but not a ceasefire. The Liberals have had a more difficult issue because the fault lines on this issue in Canada kind of run right through their caucus.
Right.
What's your sense of how they're able to manage that by letting the conversation go to this point?
For the Conservatives, it's an easy issue where we're very pro-Israel, always happens. One of the most
Liberals, how they're
I know, and I'll get to that.
Yeah, okay,
but I just want to reiterate the link that the Conservative Party has had with Israel. They're one of the strongest supporters of Israel in the world. The Conservative Party of Canada is. The Liberals have a different makeup and a very different caucus. If you look at a lot of their MPs, they have a more diverse caucus. So you're going to have diverse opinions in there that are going to be very different. And how they manage that, it's going to be hard. But we're seeing the polling on this that's coming out. The caucus is very similar to what we're seeing as an actual national polling on this issue. So it's not that far off. Yeah,
it's not just a diverse caucus, Susan, it's diverse ridings, right? Some of the urban centers that they represent, big Jewish populations, big Muslim, big Arab populations.
Yeah, I went, my original hometown is Milton, Ontario.
Right.
Ontario represent here.
Western Canada, we call it.
Yeah, and Adam Van Couverden from Milton was one of the signatories to the ceasefire note. And I went and looked up what the stats are in Milton, and it was a few hundred people of Jewish persuasion and 30,000 Muslims in my old hometown. So that tells you a little bit about what's influencing things on the ground there as well, too. I will say, I did a bit of digging yesterday about what happened in the meeting with the leaders, when they all got together. And I was heartened by it a bit. It sounds like there were grown-ups in the room, that they were all concerned about this. They were all really concerned about how this is playing out on the ground. And I saw a question period after, and you didn't see it turning into a thing then.
But there hasn't been a lot on this in question period.
And
it's been about affordability, but not even can you give us an update on efforts to get citizens out of Gaza and all these, even sort of informational questions, it's kind of been low.
It sounds like they had a long time with Jody Thomas, the National Security Advisor, who went point by point. She didn't say much more than they've said in public, but they got to ask their questions, and that's probably how it should be handled. But.
Right. So, Greg, the issue, as I heard it inside the Liberal caucus this week, the letter that was released last Friday to the Prime Minister that about 24 Liberals signed, a lot of people didn't know was coming. They were frustrated it happened after they'd had that meeting, the photo that was tweeted out by Anthony Howe's father and others. But also there were people who might have signed that letter, didn't know about the letter, went back to their riding where this is a big issue and got yelled at because they hadn't signed a letter calling for a ceasefire. So there's the potential for these sorts of flare-ups if the process is
and that's because it's not led officially. I like the fact that Jewish, Muslim, and Arab Liberal MPs met and had a thoughtful conversation and a respectful conversation about this. Fred is exactly right. You cannot compare the Liberal, Conservative, and NDP caucuses as apples to apples. They're very, very different. But there's another aspect of this. I mentioned with Ken McDonald about how that there was no public kind of humiliation of him right now. A few weeks ago, there was a protest around the Hill, pro-family, anti-LGBTQ, and a memo went out from the Conservative leader's office saying, don't say anything about that to the Conservative MPs. That's not going to fly with the Liberal caucus. It's just not going to work on something like this. And I think the best way is, if you look at it, the Liberal caucus is really reflective of Canadians right now. I think there's a lot of people that have the same sort of views. And I think if we've learned anything over the last couple of weeks is on this issue, and it's always been thus, and I can tell you as someone who's done panels for about 15 years, this is not a topic I really enjoy because you need experts. Language is really precise on this, and it should be left to diplomats and experienced individuals.
Well, look, and don't take this the wrong way, but that's why people like you guys disappeared from this show in the early days of the war. I'm an Irish Catholic kid from St. John's. We needed people who with real experience on this to help us through it. But look, it's good to have you back. We're out of time now. I want to thank Fred DeLorey, Greg MacEachern, and Susan Delacourt. Happy Friday. Enjoy your weekend, gang. And thank you all for watching today and every other day this week. I'm David Cochran. Thank you so much for watching Power and Politics Canada Tonight with Sarah Galashan is up next on CBC News Network with the latest news and headlines. So stay right where you are and have a good weekend, everybody.